Read teacher Rabbi LM Divisively of Committee Hebrew Ethics Maarifado. Injanlonge Makadime say
learning through history is a do or die activity. We shall review the origins of royalty, why totems matter, and the great year. Today, there is no single source which is reliable and trustworthy, which can be used to learn and master world history. Sanitized sources have been explicitly written divisively so as to exploit all origins on earth, people, resources, and everything else. Ancient African historical timeline is pivotal, for it is the bedrock upon which your life, happiness, as well as identity clarification rests. The question is, where can you learn true history? There are two different views on ancient Egyptian history. There's a reason why we should learn and also master this history, because it's part of Bantu history. The one accepted by scholars, denied by the same. Do you know that in many universities, black history courses are actually devoid of real, honest black history? There's a lot of propaganda and a little bit of truth. The educational system is a branch of the colonization and enslavement of black people. Therefore, it cannot give you liberating history. Eventually, when we study history, specifically of our own race, again, European history needs to be discarded and never be used as a standard. Welcome to our video today, historical timeline lie you must know. There is an important paradigm view of history that has been fixed. Very few stray beyond its preset boundaries. If clear evidence comes up and threatens to destroy or jeopardize the limits, these are officially deemed ridiculous and thrown away. Our own African governments and leadership lead in distorting it, even to the point of rationalizing obvious proofs as symbolic or simply dismissing them as fanciful. Top of the truth rarely taught concern Egyptians, Sumerians, Mohenjo-Darons, Harappans, Cretans, Elamites, and Nubians, who were all literate 3,000 years to 4,000 years ago, before there was any Greek or Roman walking in those areas, or even in Europe or on the earth. Consider ancient Egyptian timeline. You can see that it is all here and it is locked as early dynastic. And you can see that here ancient Egyptian historical timeline, dark-skinned matrilineal mother goddess, which starts around 4,000 years before Common Era with all these kings across. This is a Egyptian dynastic timeline, pre-dynastic, that is 3,000 years before Common Era, early dynastic, old kingdom, where they give you Kufa, Munumtapa, Akhenaton, Ramesses. These are new kingdom, Libyan, third intermediate period, late Persian. This is where the foreigner comes in now. Once you see the Persian here, the foreigner is coming. The late period in Egypt lasted between 343 332 BCE, a time when Egypt became a Persian satrap. The country was reunified by Semitic in 664 610 BCE, in part because the Assyrians had weakened their control. He subsequently breached standing taboos and invited Greek, Carian, Jewish, Phoenician, as well as other Bedouin tribes to come and guarantee Egyptian or African security to block the red line. And that was our time that we fell, and we have never been able to rise again, because these people later on turned down to be Roman period, Coptic period, Byzantium, Arab conquest, because we had already been penetrated by the time of Semiticus. So where are the lies that we're talking about? What is the real problem? The periods listed above and the explanations found in millions of books are bound and locked within the dynastic period of ancient Hamid, so-called ancient Egypt by Egyptologists, those who study and specialize in the studies of ancient Egypt. The way and the reason why it is locked, it is so that it tallies with the biblical history. The reason why this is so is because the dominant group of people amongst the Egyptologists came from Europe, Christian Europe. So you see this timetable here, this timeline, 4004 creation occurred there. Then they say Zosa's pyramid was built after creation. They don't want it to be built in 5000 BCE or 6000 BCE. So they squeeze everything to fit within this timeline up to the point of Jesus' birth. And also they connect it with the events in the Old Testament. So they say this is traditional ancient Egyptian BC, and the Great Pyramid, they say it was built 2500 before our common era. They don't talk about the Sphinx because that's a very hot potato. They know it. Synchronisms between the Old Testament characters and ancient Egypt include the following: pre-dynastic and Old Kingdom. Then they say that was Mizraim. We know this as Muziraumwe. They say Abraham, that's when he was. That's their history that they give. Say Middle Kingdom, they say Joseph and the Moses and the Exodus. New Kingdom, they give Solomon, Rehoboam, Asa and Ahab. And third, intermediate and late periods, they give Hezekiah, Josiah and Jeremiah. And then after that, and Necho finishes off Jeremiah there. So this is why we say it's a lie, because it is being squeezed to suit biblical history. Extremely ancient history that falls outside these limits is ridiculed, ignored, and trivialized. Why? We have given the answer already, but we want to continue to say, what kind of chronology do you subscribe to? The one that you subscribe to determines your worldview. One scholar even wrote, viewing the evidence from a biblical framework makes the histories of Egypt and the Old Testament fit together like two sides of a zipper. So zipping you and shutting your mind. This alone is proof that the orthodox approach is a lie. But let us give more proofs that the current Egyptian timeline is out of line. We got all these other lists that they do not want or that they ridicule and they throw away and never consider in Egyptology and everywhere where we study ancient history of Africa. Palermo, Stone, Turin, Royal Canon, Manetos Aegyptica, Abydos King List. Abydos, apparently, that's where you get the name Abuja. Karnak Tablet, Saqqara Tablet, Mini Statue of Coptos, Tomb Uj Abydos, Tenyeo Palette, Metropolitan Museum Palette, Hunters Palette, and Tombs Ot Abydos. All these palettes and all these lists do something. They list kings that go beyond the 4000 and they go into infinity. Very, very ancient. The scribes of ancient Hamid tell us that the first kings of ancient Hamid established their rule almost 15,000 years ago, and also documented the other lists of ancient Egyptian kings. There's no point in them lying when they were documenting all this. The papyrus of Turin, which lists all the pharaohs who ruled over ancient Egypt, not only lists include official historic pharaohs of ancient Egypt, it also includes the deities, the gods who came from above and reigned over the lands of Africa before the first immortal pharaoh or pharaohs were given the authority and the lineage to rule 13,000 years before common era. It is a great enigma why mainstream scholars consider this ancient text as pure myth, and why most details of the ancient text have been overlooked and omitted from history books. Read this book by Howard Gardner, The Fragments of the Hieratic Papyrus of Turin, containing the names of Egyptian kings with the hieratic inscription at the back, by John Gardner Wilkinson. So you have to realize that the Palermo stele is another incredible ancient text that mentions the pre-dynastic rulers of ancient Hamid or Africa. This ancient stele even makes reference to Egyptian god Horesu, so-called Horus, suggesting that he was a physical ruler of ancient Africa thousands of years ago. Another Egyptian god, Gahuti, so-called Tot, is said to have ruled over the lands of ancient Hamid from 8670 to 7100 BCE. His totem was Sokomkanya Murewa Ngube. This is his totem or their totem, exactly like that. There's a lot of stuff that we are going over now. The great year calendar that Manetho uses in his list goes like this. The great year has two major meanings. It is defined by scientific astronomy as the period of one complete cycle of equinoxes around the ecliptic, or about 25,800 years. A more precise figure of 25,772 years is currently accepted by scholars. And this is the whole scheme of what is happening. Manetho confirms the great year pharaonic calendar. What the ancient astronomers discovered was that the sun's changing position like the hands of a clock pointed out the hours where you get, this is where you get Horus, these hours, that's Horus of the precessional cycle, a phenomenon referred to as the precession of the equinoxes. Instead of every 30 days, the ancients determined that every 2,160 years, the sun would point at a different constellations on the day of the equinox or solstice. That is, it takes 2,160 years for the sun to slowly move from that house to another house like the ticking hands of a celestial clock. So this is very, very interesting. Ancient writers confirm ancientness according to Plutarch. Ra departed to the heavens from the earth, and Osiri became pharaoh of Egypt with Isis, and they built Thebes. So today, he had reigned on the earth, Ra, for a total of 36,600 years. After this period of rule, we then have the mortal pharaohs of ancient Hamid. So this other one is suggesting that 13,000 years ago, that's when we started to have other totem of the lion coming into office. Totemic connections. The age of Leo, 13,000 years ago, our ancient scribes and sages tell us that the first kings, Ishe, Lord, Nkos, established their rule 15,400 years ago, also as documented by the ancient list of Egyptian kings. Accordingly, Africa became paradise. It prospered and grew, and with the coming of the new age of Leo, 13,000 years ago, our ancestors captured the great Sphinx, lion Sphinx. That's the other proposal, but there is evidence that the Sphinx was sculptured almost 1 million years before Common Era. This too is the origin of the 13 royal houses among us, the Bantus that should rule the tribes of the Bantus. The Sphinx, which is a lion body with a human head, is the king of the beasts. But events have already overtaken everything. Interestingly, the high priest Manetho, who had access to unlimited ancient texts, scrolls, and scripts in the ancient libraries in Hamid or Rakodzis, so-called Alexandria, wrote a history for the Greek pharaoh to know. He produced over 40 volumes, making references to extremely old chronology and timeline, and referencing many millions of years ago. He teaches and reviews to us that the divine beings who ruled on the earth in pre-pharaonic Hamid later became the Netas, or the principalities, which we talk about some of them. His timeline is not promoted, and yet his geologist uses it, borrows a lot from it, but then continue to insist that it is full of lies. The geologists accuse Manetho of fabricating and lying, and they say he is not credible. What an incredible situation that we have. We should ask ourselves, am I following a fallacious historical timeline? Who knows our story and history better? Our ancient ancestors and scribes who wrote it, or modern scholars of enslaving and colonizing nations? The choice and the practice from your choice are all yours, Mahlabezu. Let's talk. We are the best on the earth. This is our email, join@maarifado.com. Subscribe to our channel, Committee Hebrew Ethics. This picture Rabbi LM Dumizulu saying thank you, Tatenta Siabonga. Have a good day.
Committee Hebrew Ethics, Maarifado.